Hello and welcome to The Wire. I am Sumedha. Today we're talking about the discussion around the marital rape exception. The Delhi High Court currently is hearing petitions. The matter is before court and they're discussing whether Section 375, which has an exception 2, which pertains to marital rape, should be struck down. The position and the kind of discussions which are taking place, we're going to be taking you through those discussions and touching down on some of those aspects today. The position is that the fact that women who are married, they should not be coerced into having sexual intercourse with their husbands or face any sort of sexual coercion, and therefore they should have access to some sort of legal recourses, and therefore this exception must be struck down. The legal position and what the center is maintaining is the fact that once a woman is married, consent is assumed and it continues to be assumed throughout the marriage. As India discusses the criminalization of marital rape and the matter is taken to court, there are men on the streets and men on Twitter and on social media who are now boycotting marriage. So we're going to be talking about consent, the marital rape exception, and the marriage strike. We're joined by Vrinda, who is an advocate at the Supreme Court. We really appreciate you giving us time today and discussing this with us. Thank you so much.
Hello.
Thanks. So my first question as we begin this conversation is that what is going on in the court? So this has taken a long time for the courts to come to this point where we're having this discussion and we're seeing this play out not just in the courtroom but also on social media, also in our streets, in our homes where this conversation is playing out right now. So what is currently happening, and if you can take us through the kind of positions, the kind of arguments that are happening.
So in the Delhi High Court, there are writ petitions that have been filed, which have challenged the constitutional virus, which is to say the constitutionality of Exception 2 to Section 375 of the Indian Penal Code. Exception 2 says that sexual intercourse or sexual acts by a husband with his wife, the wife being above the age of 18 years, is not rape. Section 375 of IPC, as we know, defines the offense of rape. So basically what it says is that a husband cannot be prosecuted by his adult wife, even if he has forced sexual intercourse or forced sexual act where she is not consenting. That cannot constitute the offense. It will not be rape. He will not be prosecuted. Any other man, I may be engaged to somebody, I can prosecute my fiance for forcing himself upon me against my consent. But when I have entered marriage, marriage is kept at such a pedestal that the wife is denuded of all her rights, and the husband's rights are then protected by law. So where does this come from? There is a batch of petitions which have challenged this. And then there are certain men's rights activists, men's rights organizations, which are opposing the deletion of this exception. So as we know, Section 375 has gone through many changes, always through campaigns that have been led by women's movement and through the lived experiences of women. We recall that after the injustice done to Mathura, in the state versus Tukaram versus state of Maharashtra case, a judgment of the Supreme Court, there was a lot of campaign for reform in the law led by women's movement, and then the law was amended. Then post Nirbhaya in 2013 and the Justice Verma Committee, we saw another set of legal reforms to laws relating to sexual violence, including rape, where the definition of rape was also expanded. So today we have Section 375, which describes different acts which can be committed as sexual acts, including penetrative sex. And it also talks about circumstances where a woman's consent is obtained, which is against her consent, against her will, or consent is obtained through fear, fraud, or other intervening circumstances which vitiate that consent. So this constitutes rape. Now, the issue of consent has been an issue that has constantly been at the heart of any discussion around rape in India.
Yes.
From the Mathura case onwards, we would recall. And there have been many such controversial cases, even in recent times. And the whole effort has been, and in fact, the 2013 amendments therefore gave a definition of consent and said that it is to be inferred, and the man should see whether the woman has consented to it. So consent, there has always been an effort to move our jurisprudence towards a point where consent is at the heart of any sexual activity. And only when there are two consenting adults will it be an act of love, companionship, pleasure, and not an act which will constitute a crime.
Yes.
The only exception to that today stands when there is a husband-wife relationship. This has a long history, and that history is actually colonial in nature and was brought in, like the rest of the Indian Penal Code, through Lord Macaulay. But this particular exception owes its origin to Sir Matthew Hale, who said that this protects and preserves the conjugal rights of a husband.
Yes.
And therefore immediately subordinates the wife in a marital relationship, which is how marriages work in the colonial period, or even in the past in India, but not in a constitutional democracy, not in a constitutional republic where we as women, citizens, have absolutely equal rights, equal freedoms. So what did this actually do? It said that in a marriage, a woman is supposed to have given her consent in perpetuity towards sexual relations to her husband. Or the other understanding was that actually women don't have any rights.
Absolutely.
Women are like chattel. Therefore, women can neither enter into contracts of property. And so when the woman is married, her body is, who has control, dominion over that body is the husband. And therefore, the husband doesn't need to take consent from something that he owns and controls. Now, is that the present contemporary constitutional understanding in India? I think the answer is clear, no. Absolutely. We have moved, as a society, we have moved forward. Our jurisprudence as interpreted by the Supreme Court has evolved. And I will just cite 2-3 ways of looking at it.
Sure.
We've had, in the recent past, the Supreme Court has very categorically elaborated what it means to have liberty. What does human dignity mean? Particularly in the context of both marriage as well as women. The landmark judgment of Puttaswamy, which reaffirmed that privacy is a fundamental right. It's a judgment given by 9 judges of the Supreme Court of India, and therefore is today the law of the land. And how did they understand privacy? They said privacy is very much part of sexual relations, sexual agency, sexual autonomy, particularly of women. Then you had the judgment of Joseph Shine, again by the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court decriminalized adultery and very categorically says in that marriage has to be seen through the constitutional lens as a relationship between two equals. The woman is not the inferior partner in marriage. That kind of colonial or historical or even in ancient feudal India, that understanding is not with which we are going to lead our present day lives. And it cannot govern our present day lives. And it said that therefore, in marriage, the woman is not subordinated and she will have sexual autonomy. She will have sexual agency.
Yes.
Most fundamental unit. If we were to think through these judgments, what gives you the most fundamental unit of self-determination is any human being's self-determination over their own body.
Yes.
If you do not have that, what does being a free citizen mean? What does it mean to have a right to life with dignity if I have no control over my own body? So what does it say? It says, yes, there will be marital relations There will be sexual relations, and that is part of a marriage expectations. But it will be premised on dignity, which is inherent in the woman also, and therefore will have to be premised on consent.
Absolutely. And here, so what is the position of the center? Because currently they're saying that they need more time. They're saying that the kind of discussions which are taking place, it's a microscopic sort of angle which has been taken. So what is their position about it?
So at least what I have heard, what the center has said, is to actually not speak with the clarity that the government should be speaking. And actually the government is bound and takes an oath on the constitution. And while it's being said that, yes, we are very concerned about the dignity of women, it's at the same time saying, oh, there will be many ramifications, or there will be many implications. Yes, exercise of fundamental rights and freedoms will have ramifications and implications. And the state's job, and perhaps the only duty any state or any government has, is to ensure that every person, particularly those who are otherwise marginalized and vulnerable, are able to exercise their rights. So instead of saying it will have, of course, whenever a more oppressed section of society will be given rights, and rights will be, for instance, let us look at the Navtej Johar judgment. What should it do? It decriminalized consensual homosexual relations. So a group of class of people who were otherwise discriminated and criminalized, they were able to exercise their rights. Nalsa judgment, transgender persons given dignity and equality. What is the burden on the state? The state has to ensure that they will be allowed to exercise their right. So maybe there are sections, and that upholding constitutional morality is the duty of the state. And we are told that duties are paramount. For whom? For the government, for the state. Rights for the citizens, duties for the state. That is the formula on which our constitution has been envisaged. So the center is not speaking clearly. The center is trying to delay the matter. The center is saying we are consulting different groups. See, that consultation process, the center can do for whatever purpose. That's the right of the government. Nobody needs to comment on that. What does the Constitutional Court have to see? On the touchstone of constitutionality, will this exception have to be deleted? If it fails the test of constitutionality, then the exception has to go. It doesn't matter if there are people who don't like the change in law, if there are people who think that women should not be treated as equal partners in a marriage. Those are there. There can be large groups in society. All of that will have to give way to constitutional morality.
Yeah, that brings me to my next question. So if this goes, it is a big shift in Indian society and how we've seen marriages being intricately woven into our social fabric, into our cultural fabric, and how a society at large has seen marriages. So currently what we're seeing is that there is a flood on social media and also physical marriage strikes which are taking place, where there are men on the streets stating that this is in violation of men's rights, that women, when they agree to a marriage, when they consent to a marriage, they're also consenting to giving up sort of their sexual autonomy or their bodily autonomy and becoming, a part of sexual activity, and the consent is presumed. So how do you view this situation? Do you think that where we are in the society currently in India in 2022, and there are still marriage strikes, there are still men who think that they're going to boycott marriages because an exception like this, if it goes, will lead to the collapse of Indian society, as they're claiming it?
Yeah, so I think what is getting destabilized here is neither the family nor the institution of marriage. What is getting destabilized is patriarchy, it's men's privilege, and clearly what these men are saying, and that is the only way I can read this, is that they were, and they think they have a right to and a claim to have sex with their wife without her will, without her consent, and they are only looking at their own desires, and they don't respect her either as a human being or as their wife. And therefore, what is getting destabilized is men's privilege and male privilege and husband privilege, which is embedded in misogyny and patriarchy. And if that is getting destabilized by the deletion of this exception, I think we should welcome it. It's a very good step forward for Indian society, for our polity, a society where even the last NFHS data is showing that violence against women continues to be endemic and pervasive. We've been having many public discussions around, and we've had the Prime Minister and the Parliament speak to how sexual violence against women continues. Well, this is an element of sexual violence against women. And I do hope that that all leaders, both social leaders and political leaders, will weigh in on when women are getting equality. Many women are, and these wives are a subsect of women. So if marriages and family are going to be built upon oppression of women, subordination of women, and actually raping women, then such families and marriages need to be completely eliminated from our society. And men who are going on a strike, unless they are given absolute control over another human being's body, and that woman has to surrender her privacy, her dignity, her sexual autonomy, then I think such men really should remain on strike. And I don't think they deserve a wife or a girlfriend or a marriage partner at all. And they perhaps need to first be educated in multiple ways. And I think they should create a register, and that register should be available in the public domain, so that women who are entering a marriage know that, okay, these men will not respect either their desire or their autonomy, and definitely have no clue about women's dignity.
My final question to you is that, yes, you mentioned the NFHS data, and it shows that about 24%, and it's severely underreported, women face domestic violence. They do face sexual coercion in marriages. They do face abuse when it comes to sexual relationships. So when we look at this discussion currently, how do you see it playing out in terms of the other crimes as well, which are happening against women, and particularly sexual violence?
See, what have we seen in the case of sexual violence? If we are against sexual violence of women, it really doesn't matter whether it is committed in the public space or the private sphere, by a stranger or a person known to you within the home, within the family. And we know that the largest number of rapes and sexual abuse actually happens in the private sphere by people known to you. So therefore, putting up more and more CCTVs is not solving the problem. What do we need to therefore focus on is to how do we inculcate a respect for women, for the girls? How do we have, in a society which is actually very deeply entrenched in discrimination, whether through caste or religion or class, and definitely gender? All these are axes on which discrimination is practiced in our social relations regularly. So what this is saying is to do a complete overhaul on the foundational basis of society, and it would require that kind of understanding. What is happening is that if a rape takes place, and particularly if it is a brutal rape committed by strangers, we see there is a convulsion in society, where everybody will want those people hanged without trial, in public, castration, etc., etc. Well, here, frontally, the issue of sexual violence within marriage is being discussed. And what do you have? You have the same people out there pushing for regressive ideas, and immediately bogies of misuse, false case. How do they think wives would do it? Women are not crazy. Why would a woman want to walk out of a marriage if there is nothing wrong with it? So we have a whole range of very, very regressive responses, which actually shows to us that were we ever actually talking, were we as a society in 2013, when those protests were taking place post Nirbhaya, were we really committed to against sexual violence? And it would be important here to recall that what is sexual violence actually symptomatic of? It is a way in which discrimination and inequality against women, as well as a lot of misogyny that goes on in our society, it comes to the fore in the form of sexual violence. So we really need to go back into creating equality. And if that is going to, of course, unsettle society.
Yes.
And it is for the good. Society should be unsettled, where these kind of exploitative, discriminatory practices persist under the garb of marriage, under the garb of family. Such institutions will not have any place until and unless they will conform to the rights that women enjoy. And this much is clear, that women are not going back, particularly younger women. They are very determined to live their lives as equal citizens. And I think the men on strike will probably have to lead a life, a very different life, if they don't know how to relate and respect a woman's desires. So let us look at marital relationships where there is love, there is pleasure, rather than constantly looking at it as a space where there are rights that are to be asserted, particularly over a woman's body.
Absolutely. On that note, I'd like to bring this conversation to an end. Thank you so much for sharing all these insights, for taking out the time to speaking with us and sharing this analysis. Thank you.